Right, for our next topic in lesson 82, we're going to talk about two words that we've heard before, and especially the first word, which is domain. We've had a little bit of, and we're going to talk about more on what range means. Now, these are typically two topics or two things that can be a little confusing. And I want you to write down these two definitions. Domain is simply the numbers that we can use in an equation or a function, or that we can put in. And range are the numbers that come out or are the result of. And I just want you to write the two definitions down first, so then we're going to go through some examples, and I think after we go through some examples, this will clear these two definitions up a little bit. So let's take a look at example 1. And in example 1, I have a function, okay, f of x is equal to 2x. Now remember, the main part of this function is to the right of the equal sign. Now what they want us to do is to find the domain and the range. Now the domain are what numbers can we use. So in other words, does it matter what numbers we can put in for x? So as I drew the arrow up here, it really doesn't matter what numbers I use. I can use any number and substitute that number in for x. For example, if I put 0 in for x, let's see, 2 times 0, the result is 0. I could put negative numbers in for x. I could put in a negative 3, and 2 times a negative 3 is a negative 6. So something I want to kind of zero in on before we answer this example is the numbers that I can put in for x. It really doesn't matter. So if I use 0, f is 0, well, let's see, I'd have 2 times 0, and the result, or in other words the range, the result of this would be 0, because 2 times 0 is 0. So again, domain are the numbers we can put in, range are the numbers that come out of it, or the result of. So the domain of this function, I can use any number. So I'm going to say then that the domain is equal to any real number. So in other words, real meaning I can use decimals, I can use fractions, I can use negatives, anything. So any real number I can put in. Now the range, and I'll just use r, well, I could get a decimal, I could get a negative number, depending on what I put in. So again, any real number can be a result of this. It doesn't matter what we put in, and since it doesn't matter what number I put in, it's not going to matter what result I have. And that's our domain and range for example 1. Okay, now we really start getting into and specifying what numbers we can put in. So for example here, they just want us to find the domain of this function. So I have f of x equals the square root of 5 minus x. Now something with a square root, I cannot, as of right now, we cannot take the square root of a negative number. Alright? So I can take the square root of a positive number, or a number that's neutral, like 0. But I cannot take the square root of a negative number. Right now we don't have enough tools to be able to do that. So what numbers can I put in for x, knowing that I don't want to have a negative number come out of this? So to keep that in mind here, for example, I could put 4 in for x, because 5 minus 4, let's see, 5 minus 4 is 1, and that's a positive number, that's okay. I can put 3 in, for x, and 5 minus 3 is 2, and I can take the square root of 2. I'm going to get a decimal, but that's fine. I could put in, so I could put 4 in, I could put 3 in, I could put 2 in, because 5 minus 2 is 3, and that's okay. And I can keep on going. I can even put negative numbers in. For example, I could put a negative 1 in. So 5 minus a negative 1, which means 5 plus 1, and I get 6. So that's okay. So, alright, what numbers can't I put in so that I get a negative number out of the result? Well, here's an example. I could put 5 in. 5 minus 5 is 0, and that's still okay. But how about if I put 6 in? if I put 6 in for x, and notice then that I'm going to get a -1, and that I cannot do that right now. That's something that we don't have enough tools to be able to figure out what that is. I can't put 6 in, I can't put 7 in, I can't put any number in that is 6 or above. Now also, and we need to think about this a little bit, I'm going to say then that we cannot put in any number. I can put in 5 or any number smaller than 5. So what's the domain? Any number that's less than or equal to 5 will work. Because once I start putting numbers in that are bigger than 5, I'm going to get a negative. For example, 5.1. What's 5 minus 5.1? Well, I get a -0.1, and I can't do that right now. So any number that's less than or equal to 5, I can put in, just like I was doing through here, because I'll have a result of positive numbers with that. All right, how about the domain of g of x equals 1 over x? Now, this one is really, I don't have much that I can't use. Really, there's only one number I can't use, and that's 0. So in other words, I can't put 0 in for x because 1 over 0, I can't divide by 0. Remember, a long time ago, we talked about why you can't divide by 0. I can take 0 and divide by numbers, but this I can't do. So what's the domain? Well, any number, so I'm going to write down d equals any number x that's not equal to 0. So x just cannot be equal to 0. Because if it's equal to 0, that's something I can't divide by 0. So any number not equal to 0, like a -1, like 5, like a -10, or 4, I can even use decimals, and that's okay, just so I don't use 0. So any number not equal to 0. Okay, now how about of graphs? Now, usually the x-axis or x-coordinates represent the domain. And usually the y-axis or the y-coordinates represent the range. So for my domain, all right, I'm going to move along the x-axis. So in other words, I'm going to move from right here, which my open circle is above, to right here. Okay, so my domain is moving along the x-axis. So x can be greater than, x can be greater than a -2 and less than or equal to 3. Now, why did I put greater than a -2 and not a line under it? Well, because this is an open circle. And notice over here, this is a closed circle. So in other words, x can be any number that's greater than a -2. Notice I'm reading it from the middle to the left. And then x can be any number less than or equal to 3. So any number in this region right here will work. And that's my domain. Now my range is moving along the y-axis. So in other words, going from, and I'm going to put this in a different color, moving from right here, 0, all the way up to here. Okay? So in other words, y can be greater than or equal to 0 and less than or equal to, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm moving to the highest point my graph goes up on to the lowest point that the graph goes down on. So again, the x-axis represents numbers with a domain, and typically the y-axis going up and down represents numbers of the range. And so this topic then we talked about more specifically domain and range of functions.